Okay, that would explain it. All right. Y'all, I am so excited tonight because I get to introduce you to my dear friend, Ashley Clark, and she's also my writing little sister. And I had to stop and think about how the proper order for those adjectives was. Although, Ashley, you have your master's in creative writing and teach in writing and literature. So did I get it right?
You did. Yeah, you sure did.
It's one of those things that as I've traveled like in Italy and places like that, anybody who's learning English, there's a certain order to adjectives, and we don't think about that here because we just pick it up. And
that's so true. It's like a kid learning how to read and they switch the words,
Yeah,
English
exactly.
is weird.
It is. And yet, it's something that they have to be really intentional about. So anyway, this is my great friend, Ashley Clark, and it is so much fun because we were talking just a few moments ago about how in our normal rhythm of life, we would see each other at least once a year. And thanks to COVID, we haven't. And so this is so fun to kind of get my Ashley fix and just get to hang out with you tonight. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, I feel the same way. I've missed getting to see you so much. Like even once a year is already not enough. So missing out on seeing you this year, it was just hard for my heart. So I'm very happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And so for those of you who have joined in, I'm so glad to have you just have this opportunity to get to know Ashley. And we're going to talk about her books and writing and all kinds of things. So see the comments coming in. Thanks so much. Nona and Linda, so fun to have you with us. And always feel free to drop questions in the comments because we want to definitely talk about what you're interested in. But the fun thing about Ashley is in the last 6 months, she's had 2 books come out. And these books are amazing. And I'm going to read some reviews in a little bit for you. The writing is incredible, but the covers are just gorgeous. I have to say, The Dress Shop on King Street came out in December, and I endorsed this early on as you were even looking for your publishing home, which fortunately you found at Bethany. I have had this book face out on my bookshelf in my main room because it's just gorgeous. So what has your publishing process been like being with Bethany?
First of all, let me just say that is so sweet of you. Thank you so much. I have been so blessed to have you all along the way. Like you have no idea how much that has meant to me. Nothing short of a dream would be the answer to your question. I love everything and everyone at Bethany House. It took me a really long time to get published. And one of the reasons was because I wanted to hold out for the right fit. I knew that I could only debut once and that I wanted it to be the right fit versus just a fit, and Bethany has really come through on that. Certainly one of the foremost things has been, like you mentioned, the covers. I love the covers. And I feel like when people tell me that they like them and they compliment me, I just want to say, I know they're beautiful because I have no investment in making that. Like that is not me. That's some brilliant cover person who did that. And I just love them too. I think they're so pretty. So thank you. But yeah, honestly, Bethany House is just amazing. Everybody there is amazing. And I think that one of the things I love most about them is that they really do have such a ministry-based perspective, not only in what they're publishing, but also in the ways in which they're publishing it. The way they interact with their authors, the way they support both authors and readers. I mean, they're always doing things like praying for their authors or praying for their readers and just really actively invested beyond the business bottom dollar. So yeah, it's been wonderful. I just adore them.
Yeah, well, and Bethany is just a perfect fit for your kind of book because these are historical, split time. They're you describe them on your webpage as you're a Southern storyteller, which you definitely are, and we'll drill into that. But it's also romantic women's fiction. And so before we dive into that, Joy says your books are a delight, which I agree. And Linda's like, oh, a new to me author, which I'm so glad because Linda, you'll love her books. But Erica agrees, this hat on the dress shop on King Street is to die for. It's just red and it's that 1930s style and it's just gorgeous. So you're a Southern storyteller. What does that mean to you?
Wow, that's a good question. What does that mean to me? Well, I'll start by saying I am born and raised in the South. I live in the panhandle of Florida, so we're kind of like cushioned between Alabama and Georgia. And so I've always grown up familiar with Southernisms, Southern culture, everything from the big family experience to you talk to strangers at the grocery store, these types of things. And I think that it wasn't until a few years into my writing that I recognized the extent to which my own experience was influencing my writing voice. And at one point, when I did begin to realize that, I thought this is something to really lean into, because things that I just naturally enjoy, like going to Charleston, for example, are things that to other people might be different from their everyday experience. And so yeah, I would say that that's where a lot of the Southern aspect comes from. And then in terms of the romantic women's fiction, I actually used to write contemporary romance. Like I thought that that's what I was going to do, is be a contemporary romance author. And it wasn't until, goodness, probably about 5 or 6 years worth of writing that I finally got brave enough to try writing historical. And from there, it kind of turned into women's fiction. And I did not plan for that to happen. And that's why you still see a lot of like heavier romance threads. But I think it just ended up making this shift where it became a little bit more about family secrets and the suspense of trying to figure out some things that the past has maybe hidden from us, sort of like a treasure hunt of sorts. Yeah. And it was a little heavier on that than it was just straight romance. And so that's kind of how that transition happened.
Well, and it's really true, because each of these books, because you've got The Dress Shop on King Street, and then Paint and Nectar, which just released about 3 weeks ago, towards kind of the middle of May. So I was teasing you that it's like you have a toddler and a newborn when it comes to books, because they're only 6 months apart in release dates. But when you kind of drill into them, there's some item that is connecting the storylines across time. So in some ways it has kind of a Rachel Houck, the wedding dress or the love letter or something like that. But in The Dress Shop, it was a button. And then with Paint and Nectar, remind me what it was?
Well, she's a watercolorist, and there's a lot that's going on with her house and so forth. But the biggest thing is the missing silver. There's some heirloom silver that's missing. That's probably what you're referring to.
Yeah. And so, you've got there are these secrets, but they represent like these deeper mysteries and the bringing to light. I think as humans, as people, we have this desire, and it goes back to Adam and Eve, to hide and to pretend that there are these parts of us that just don't really exist. And yet your stories are about pulling that into the light so that real freedom can be found for your characters. And then that models what can happen for us when we're willing to let go of the secrets of the past. So how did you decide on kind of digging into this? Because they're deeper. I mean, they are these women's fiction type of themes, but balanced out by these really wonderful romances as well. So what kind of pulled you to those deeper themes?
Well, first of all, that was really beautifully said. I feel like we need to get everything that you just said and put it like on a bookmark or something. Can we make that like my new slogan? We need to go back and listen. Exactly what you said, because that was really good. But to answer your question, I really feel like, especially with Dress Shop, I feel like it was something that really God developed in the story, even beyond what I was cognizant of at the time. So for Dress Shop on King Street, the story behind that is I knew there was going to be this whole thing with dressmaking, and I knew that there was going to be a modern day heroine and a historical heroine, but I hadn't really figured it out yet. And I have a friend named Sue Bennett who does walking tours in Charleston. And she told me about this satchel That's it's a real historical artifact. You can find it now at one of the Smithsonian's. And it's about these two women going all the way back to Civil War times who were separated. A 9-year-old girl and then her mother, who they were both enslaved and the girl was sold. And that just resonated so deeply in me. And I realized this is what my story has been missing. And so I think that and Paint and Nectar has a similar kind of historical mystery going on as well. So I think for both of them, really that shift for me happened in feeling a deeper level responsibility for the true to life stories that these represented. Because even though they're fictional, they really do have a resonance that is not fictional. Mm-hmm. And so I felt as though I had to take that seriously because I was stewarding not only this message God had given me for the stories, but also the stories of real people who had come before. So how can I honor that in a way that it brings it into the present so that we can be challenged by those lessons?
And I think that's so critical because there's a lot of talk right now in literary circles and things like that about, well, what can we really write about? How can we look backwards and do it the right way? And I think that you've really nailed it because it's about honoring the stories of the past, but also learning from them. And if we don't retell those stories, they're just gone. And we can't, there's a quote, and I can't remember who says it now, but, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And that's not what we want to do. I think we're definitely in a period as a country where we're like, okay, how do we go forward? How do we learn from the past and live into the future better than we did? And so that honoring really comes through in your writing, that you're holding that history very carefully and then pulling it forward because it is a slip time or a split time story where part of it's in the past and part of it's happening in the more contemporary setting. So what do you find the most challenging aspect of that, doing the historical or writing the contemporary?
That's a great question. I feel like there's a weightiness that comes from the historicals because they tend to carry this immense responsibility. Like you look at with the character of Millie, for example, and her being biracial. I can remember at some points just feeling so overwhelmed because I was afraid that I was going to not do her justice. And even with Eliza, the same thing in the 1920s, we're about to go into the Depression. We're talking about these women who made a fundamental difference on how we view historical societies and historical preservation, even to this day. So it's kind of like to step into that, into these stories that have already gone from heaven to earth is this huge responsibility. And it is emotionally overwhelming sometimes because I get so scared I'm going to do them wrong. They feel like real people. But then on the flip side, I would say that typically the writing itself, if I can get past that, the writing itself tends to come a little quicker with the historical characters because I think it's such an immersive experience to be in this other world that you get kind of like just really encapsulated in that. Whereas with the contemporary, sometimes it's easier to get a little distracted with the things that are your reality,
Oh, that's a great point because it's been a while since I've written World War II, and I've been playing with the idea of doing another one, just kind of for fun, just for me. But it does feel sometimes when I'm writing contemporary that it's almost schizophrenic because I feel like I'm kind of it's so easy to get pulled away. Whereas I think you're right, with the historical, it is immersive and you have to really get into that mindset. So then it's easier to stick with it. And I think sometimes to slide back into it. So Linda said that she loves split time stories. I think a lot of us have discovered that when they're written well, like yours, that they are so much fun. But she also wants to know, how long have you been writing? And you have quite a journey to getting published.
I really have. that you
Yeah,
have been there supporting me all the way through. And I truly do not know what I would have done had God not brought Kara Putman into my life. I prayed
you
for
would
a
have brought someone else
mentor.
in.
No, but truly, I prayed that God would give me a writing mentor. And then Kara Putman just comes waltzing into my life like within a month. And little did I know that God would answer that prayer very quickly, but my prayer for publication would not be quite so swift.
Yeah.
And I think he sent me precious little Kara because he knew she could help me get through all of this. So it actually took me a little over 10 years to get published. So my novels have only been out since December. The Dress Shop on King Street released in the beginning of December, and Pant and Nectar released about a month ago in the middle of May, like Kara said. But in terms of writing novels and pursuing publication, it has been over a decade. And looking back now, I'm so grateful for that because, to be honest with you, I never would have started writing Split Time. I never probably would have gotten bold enough to try historical fiction because I was always terrified of writing historical fiction. I thought I was going to write something incorrectly, like I was going to give somebody a hat that hadn't been invented for 15 more years or something. And I was just like, no, like too much
Yeah.
research. I'm not going to do it. But through that wait, God really grew my writing voice, myself as a person, and my image of what writing needed to be. Because initially, I certainly never thought that I was just going to be in it to get rich or something. But I did have a more traditional view of a desire for publication, a desire for readers, a desire to do it all well, and I had to come to a point where God stripped me of all of that. And I truly just fell in love with stories for story's sake. And I think that it was in the purity of that love of story that my writing voice really began to grow because I was no longer worried about what people were going to say, what was going to get rejected or accepted. I was just writing what God had given me. And really that is the moment that the Heirloom Secrets novels came out of. And I don't know that I would have written them had I not come to that moment. And it took a long time for me to come to that moment.
Well, and one of the things that I've loved about walking with you through this journey is just the way you basically reached a point where you said, okay, God, I'm willing to sacrifice this. I'm willing to lay it down. And basically, the pursuit of publication. And like you said, getting to that point where you were writing just for the story, for the creative process, the partnering with God. And it was beautiful to watch and also so hard to watch because I knew what it was requiring of you. And so then when you were able to get that Bethany contract, and then when Rayla and I were almost able to give you the contract at conference, it was so cool because it was just this moment that I knew you had been waiting for and working towards, but you released it and said, okay, God, whenever you're ready, if you're ready, if this is part of my journey, I'm going to write anyway, just because it's you and me together. And it was just so cool to watch. So Linda says, God's timing is always perfect. And several people are saying in the comments, they're so glad you waited because Split Time is either their favorite or you write it so well. And, just that writing the story that God gave you. So Rachel McDaniel's like, yes, amen, this is it. So, because it has. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially readers or even sometimes other writers, don't understand the individual writing journey for each person. Because you could look at mine and go, okay, I showed it up at ACFW in 2005. In 2006, I get my contract. In 2007, the book comes out. In 2008, it wins an award, without realizing that back when I was a teenager, I started writing. And, just that whole journey. But once I did start writing, it was a very kind of quick, when I started writing again as an adult. But everybody's is different, and it's a unique journey that God takes you on.
Right. And I think along with that too, God is going to redeem all of those difficult places. And that's something that Paint and Nectar really takes up, is this concept of seasons in life. And I think that it's easy for me now to get on here and show these beautiful book covers and say, look at how cool this is. Look what God did, look at this book that came out of this. But the reality is, 6 years ago, it's like the middle of the night and I'm crying alone saying, what if I'm just a failure and a fraud? And I think
Yeah.
that for all of us, we go through those cycles. And so I just want to encourage anybody who might be listening or watching, who might be an aspiring writer or have otherwise some kind of a dream, just to know that there is a holiness about what to us feels like a drought season. And I think a lot of us are in a place right now after the craziness of this past year where, for whatever reason, it feels like it's just hard. Maybe it's hard for your dreams, maybe it's hard financially, maybe it's hard socially, whatever it is. Like, you don't have to fix the hard. Like, God will use the hard. And I think that, especially with paint and nectar, like, I use a lot of gardening imagery and it's used often, but there's something very poignant about the idea that it's from underneath the soil that the roots grow. And it can be easy to feel discouraged when we're not seeing what's happening, but God is always faithful to be developing those systems within us that we're going to need for support later, even when we feel like he's gone, even when we feel like it's hopeless, even when we feel like we need a new dream. Like, God is still there with us, regardless of whether emotionally we're on a high or whether we're on a low.
That is so true and so rich. And just the idea, even that germination and things like that, it all happens underground. And then all
Right.
of a sudden, I mean, like, if you were to walk around my gardens right now, there's flowers everywhere, but 3 weeks ago there weren't. And
Right.
even just different, God's actions are more clear in the rear view. And it's so true. And that's why sometimes we need to stop and look back so we can just really appreciate what God has done, so that then that gives us the faith going forward. And Rachel has given us a beautiful transition, because these books are like your love notes to Charleston.
They are.
Char-
They really are. If you haven't
and
noticed, I love Charleston.
I had always wanted to go to Charleston. And then I just kept talking to you. I kept talking to you. And then you helped me plan Charleston. And it's just this charming, delightful, beautiful little, down in the downtown old historic district. You just walk around and you're like, oh, there's so many stories that could be told from here. And you have written them so well. These books couldn't take place anywhere else. I mean, they are definitely Charleston bound stories. So why Charleston? Because you're from the panhandle of Florida. So why Charleston?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just fell in love with Charleston. Like, from the first time that I went, one of the biggest things for me was taking a walking tour. And the man, he was a dear friend of mine, he's since passed away, but he's an older gentleman who did walking tours. And the man who we did our tour with was just so passionate about the city that it was one of those people who, I always hope that I teach like this. I think there are some people in life who are so passionate that you catch their passion even if you didn't care. And that's what this man was like. He was so passionate about his city. He was a 13th generation Charlestonian, that I became passionate about his city because of just the stories he had to tell. And so in that walking tour, he started saying things like, okay, well, this house, this person went out to sea and they never found them, or this house, blah 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 blah. And I feel like I'm just waiting with bated breath for the next thing he's going to say, because there are all these mysteries abounding. And I have always been a very sentimental person. Like, when I go into a room, I'm probably too cognizant of, if the walls could talk. Like, what stories do these objects and these houses and these spaces have to tell? So as I'm walking through the streets of Charleston, I just feel like this immersive kind of this question of what happened here before I came on the scene, and could I come up with some stories that maybe fictionalize some things that are not fiction? Could I provide some fictional answers for things that maybe have been the real answers have been lost to time? And so I would say part of it was just my absolute love of the city. And then some of it was also the discovery of historical artifacts that were specific to Charleston. So it was like, there was no way that I could take them out of that context, because they wouldn't make any sense were they not in that particular area.
Yeah, and you do a great job because there is an art and a skill to creating a story that can't take place anywhere else. And so you've definitely done that. And Angie is like, I want to go to Charleston and I want you to be the tour guide, Ashley. And let me tell y'all, she can tell you exactly where to go. And we were fortunate enough when Eric and I went to get a tour with that gentleman that you were talking about. And his enthusiasm was just contagious. And he adored you, absolutely adored you. So here's another very important question as well. If you had to choose Charleston or Walt Disney World?
Oh, you know me so well. I honestly would have to flip a coin. Well, they're just different. I love, for those of you who may not know me as well as Kara, I am like one of those crazy Disney people who has like all of the different character hats and like unabashedly am like a Disney fanatic. Like I would wear this is how ridiculous I am. I would wear all of my Disney gear. And up until I was like 18, they would ask me if I wanted a kids menu at these restaurants because I looked so ridiculous. Like my Tigger ears and all of my like t-shirts and everything. It really would depend on my mood, honestly, because like I do love Disney World a lot, but Charleston is more like distinguished. You know, it's kind of like picking like Southern Living versus like, I don't know, the Disney equivalent of that.
Well, and it's like, I mean, there's something about Charleston that's very romantic.
Right.
And I think it's the history and like Rainbow Row and just everywhere you look, there's the details that even with all the hurricanes they've gone through, they've been able to retain a lot of that historical vibe, the Angel Oak, all of that. And then with Disney, it's very much an amusement park and it's like living in a fantasy world. And so it's just kind of fun. But Connie's like, I love Charleston. Now I can't wait to read the books. And Connie, you really need to. They're wonderful. Beauty and fun. Just, it's so, both of them are great. Like I've only been to Disney World once so far. And when we were there, it was for my parents' 50th anniversary. And they took all of us like 3 years ago.
I was like, what?
Yeah, we were a clan. There were 26 of us, all in, the matching shirts and all that jazz. And so the kids made us promise then that for our 25th, we would go back. COVID. So we're going over Thanksgiving because we're like, okay, I think it's still technically our 25th year.
Yes, slide it in there.
Slide it in. So, and then everybody, you'll get the pins where everyone will be celebrating their birthday and all that fun stuff.
You have to get the pins.
Joy wants to know though, would you wear your Mickey ears through a walking tour of Charleston?
I would probably wear my Mickey ears anywhere. I'm pretty shameless about this kind of stuff. That's one of the nice things about having a kid is it's like you have an excuse to act ridiculous and you can just be like, oh, it's my kid, they want me to do this. But really it's just
I don't have a choice. So Catherine has a really good question as well. Have you been to the Old Slave Market Museum in South Carolina?
No, but I think that would be fascinating. I've heard really good things about that experience and it's very sobering and just, really inspiring, but I haven't not been personally.
Yeah, and I've heard of it, same way, I've heard of it, but I have not spent much time in South Carolina, so I've not gotten there yet. But I agree, I think it would be incredibly sobering, and I think it's an important piece of our history that we need to understand. And looks like the dress shop on King Street, as well as Lisa Wingate's
Before We Were Yours.
Book of Lost Names.
Right? Oh, Book of Lost, yes.
That one, reading that one in close succession with this one just about broke my heart, but in a good way, just an understanding. And that's one of the beautiful things about fiction is it helps build our empathy to understand, parts of our history and our past that may not be our favorite. Pam says she's read Dress Shop on King Street and loved it. She lives in South Carolina and loves Charleston. Rebecca was replying to Catherine, yep, that sounds like a great museum. And Catherine, I think, is referring to maybe Charleston in general. I need to go there. And Joy says you should twin in Epcot. So.
Oh, I like it. I'm always up for a trip to Epcot.
So last question, I'm just double checking to make sure there are any more comments. I think I've gotten them all, which is always so fun. Thanks y'all for commenting away. English breakfast tea over Constant Comment. Really?
Yeah, actually, I would say so. But I've only had Constant Comment like once,
Oh,
whenever we were in Canada, of all places. Isn't
really?
that strange? Yeah, it was very strange. Yeah, I'm a pretty boring tea person. I love tea. I drink it every day, but I'm pretty consistent with the English breakfast.
Okay. Yeah, because I love to get the at Panera it's British breakfast and add a little bit of cream to it and stuff. But Constant Comment would be like my favorite because that
Oh, yeah?
you
I
don't need
never knew that about you.
anything. Yeah, it's just it's good. It's sweet. So
A
um,
decade of friendship. Who knew?
yeah, exactly. We might have known each other for 10 years, but there are still things to learn.
I
Always
know.
learn.
Amazing to me that I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Joy's actually saying that Twinings at Epcot is the tea shop in the UK pavilion. Yes, that makes a whole lot more sense. Sorry, I wasn't tracking along. But yeah, there's something when we're in London, not that it's happened often, but you have to go to the tea shops. And we just, half of our suitcase will be tea. Like we're going to drink it in this lifetime. But when you're
You
in
just sounded
England,
so cool right now. I'm so jealous of you that you could say that sentence. That's like a life goal right
yeah,
there. When we were in
just like,
England and we came back with these suitcases full of
yeah,
tea, my
when
goodness,
we're
that
in
sounds so fun. Can I
when
come
we're in
next time,
Italy, we
please?
come back with coffee, because that's what you do. Oh, Linda wants to know if you have a newsletter, and she does. All you have to do is go to her website, and it will pop up with a form. I actually just joined earlier tonight. Shame on me. And it's ashleyclark.com or .net.
AshleyClarkBooks.com.
Yeah,
Yep.
ashleyclarkbooks.com. So she's delightful. You really want to, if you haven't read them yet, The Dress Shop on King Street and Paint and Nectar. And always remember that one great thing you can do for authors, especially those of us who've had books come out during the pandemic, is now that things are opening up, ask your libraries to carry our books, because that is a great way for readers to discover new to them authors. I can't tell you how many authors I've discovered at the library where then I end up buying all of their books. But also for new authors like Ashley, it's a great way to help get their books in circulation so people can discover them. So both of her books have come out in the last 6 months. They're wonderful. And I hope you've enjoyed this chance to get to know my friend Ashley. Ashley, is there anything you'd like to say as we wrap up?
I just have enjoyed chatting with you so much. You guys, I love Cara Putman, so I'm thrilled to be here. And I want to also reiterate what you said. Thank you to everybody who commented and watched and participated, because it makes all of these things so much more fun when we can interact with you. So yes, please do continue to keep in touch. And thank you, Cara, for having
Thanks so
me.
much. And be sure to tune in next week where we will have another book talk on Tuesday night. We've got a full lineup through the end of July, and I'm already booking into August. So thanks so much for joining me. And you can always catch up on the YouTube channel or over on the podcast on my website. So thanks again so much for joining us.